Oh my God. Okay, I start recording. Sorry. What? All right. Luckily we haven't started anything. So the first milestone to create an application is actually written in the lab. Here it's very simple, right? The second one is how we read the arguments from whatever we type in, like in the command. And then here, the next step. For example, if you want to say something add or list like this, you should see a list of to-dos, right? So I'm gonna do if else here, if process.add to and end process.add to equal to list, then we will console log to-dos, for example. Or something like this. So now I will type this. Oh, crap, missing E here. Sorry. Okay, again. So now we see a list of to-dos, but increase the height of the terminal. Okay. Do you want me to make it bigger? Right. So what's the problem here, guys? What if I want to add more to do? For example, else. Oh my God, like this. So if I want to add more to do, I can do something like this, right? To do dot push. So we need to check what do we want to put. We need to push the another to dos, and the comment here need to add more stuff. One more argument, for example, have supper, right? Right. Okay. So we have to do something like this. So we need another argument, which is the third index, the index number 3. So if, oh my gosh, we will have a bunch of if here. If 3, then we get to do dot push process 3. Okay. Right. And then finally bring out to do. Oh, not bring, console log. Okay, let's try it. So, okay, so now we have super. Does argument v index star at 0 or 1? Okay, in JavaScript, index will always start from 0, right? Like in most programming languages, it starts from 0. So the first one, I mean, the 0, index 0 will be the node here. Index 1 will be the app.js. Index 2 will be the command add. Index 3 will be the value, what we want to add, right? So that's why we have the index 3 here. All right. So can anyone answer this question? We can add new to do like this, but what's wrong in this code? What's wrong in this code? What if I want to add another to do? What will happen then? So I will have like go to sleep. What you will see here. So if I say I type this command, what do you expect to see? Yeah. So have supper will be gone. You will have lunch, have dinner, and then go to sleep. Okay. And why is that? Why did that happen? So to understand why it happened, we need to understand the whole flow. So this array of to-dos will be generated every time we execute this file, right? So which means every time I type in a command line, we will generate a new to-dos array, which only have lunch and dinner. And then we will add another to-do. It's going to be have supper or go to sleep, right? So no matter what we do, we only have at most 3. Yeah, not really because of the index. It's because this array is generated every time we execute the code, which means to-do is always have 2 arguments, 2 elements here. Yeah, that's why we need something called database. We need something to store the data, so that the data will be keep accumulated every time we execute a code, right? And so we need to have some place somewhere to store the data. I'm going to call this data.json. Okay. And instead of const to do in here, I'm going to do it in here. Right. So here's our data. We don't have to do here. So now we don't have to do array at all. And in order to have that to do, we need to look at our local machine, read this file, get the data from this file, assign it to a variable, and then we keep adding stuff into that variable, and then we save the data back to the data.json. So we need to do 2 things. Read data from data.json, right? And then we manipulate the data. And then finally, we save it back to data.json. Cool. Do you have any objections about this? So step by step. So now in order to add more to do into this array of to-dos, we need to read the data from here. And then we push it. We push the new to-do into that list. And then finally, we save that list back to our data.json. Okay. And to do that, we have a module, a built-in module. Actually, it's a core module from Node.js, which is called FS, file system. FS, file system. Okay. So here we go. Here. And if you don't understand what FS is, so here's how developer we do. We will go to Node.js file system. Here we go. So for FS, we will have a couple of methods. First one should be read file since here. So we need to read the file. Here we go. So the first or the required argument will be the path to our files. So the path to the JSON file. Yeah. So we will have something called like fs. Before we do that, we need to import first. So const fs equal to required. This is how we import in Node.js, and you will see this a lot. You can call it var or you can call it const. It's fine. So you import this module. Don't use let. Don't use let. You can either use var or const. Just don't use let here, because you don't want to change that variable anywhere, right? Or using var, you can call it anywhere. You can define it down here, but you can call it up here. That's fine. Or you can use call. Oh, Mark, that's a good question. Earlier from Node.js 12 or 13, I couldn't use the ASIC import syntax. There's a reason for that. Back then, I read it like Node.js didn't support that ASIC syntax for importing. And to do that, to use that syntax, you need to install another library just to do that. So I don't think it's necessary. I'm not sure if Node.js 14, the new version came out here. So this is the newest version, Node.js 14. I don't really know if it's supported or not, but I still prefer this way of import. Well, there's a reason why I like it this way, because you can import it down here. If you use import blah blah blah, import fs from fs here, you need to move this line to the top of the file, right? I don't like that. Okay. So you import that file module, and how here you can use it. I'm going to call this data. I'm going to define a function just to read the file. Read data or log data equal to function, and the function I'm gonna call data buffer. Okay, as read file scenes. So I'll explain what's buffer later. So you need to target a file. So here's a file, data.json in the same folder. So I target the same folder. If it's in another folder, you will have to create a path that leads to this file. So right now I'm here. So now I can console it. So buffer if you want. Okay, so let's comment out those, and we call this function right away. Console log load data. Okay, so I'm gonna run without. So I'm gonna node app.js. All right, sorry, I didn't call the function. Okay, now you see a buffer of the file. So basically, this command, this method doesn't actually read it, convert it into the data that we can read, readable to human. So we need to do one more step, toString. Okay, so now we actually convert this buffer to string, right? So this is what we can read here. But right now it's a string. In order to make it a JavaScript object, we need one more step to convert it. So I'm gonna call data string equal to buffer dot toString. One more step. So I'm gonna console log data string. So in order to convert this string into an object, so on the right is an object, right? In order to convert it into object, we can do JSON.parse data string. Okay. So I'm gonna run the same command again. And now this one is a JavaScript array or a JavaScript object. Okay. Questions? Question? Check. Equal. Okay. Okay, do you have any question about this step? So let me explain this again. FS file system.read file scene will the required argument will be the path to the file that we want to read. So right now we want to read the data of data.json. So we give the path to that file right here. And then this function, this method, read file scene, will return a buffer. A buffer is kind of like a binary data. It's very similar. And that data is not readable by human. So in order to make it readable, we need to convert it into string. So we can use this method, buffer have this method to string. That's not enough. It's just a string. We cannot manipulate the data using JavaScript method. For example, append. We cannot use. Sorry, there's no append. We cannot use push. We cannot use concat. We cannot use slide. We cannot use pop. Anything. Those kind of methods are JavaScript. That's built from array, JavaScript array. So in order to do that, we need to convert it from string to JavaScript object. So here we go. Remember this syntax, right? I think that we used it before. JSON parse, we pass a string into JavaScript object. Then finally, we're gonna return that object. Okay, so we have a function just to read the data and return the data for us. Okay, any questions? And if you we're gonna use this a lot, not really a lot in the future, but a couple of times in the future, if you want to manipulate file in your system. Okay, if you have no question, I'm gonna move on to save the data back to the file, save the data. So I have load data. I'm gonna make another function for save data, right? So to save data is very simple. If you don't know, actually I don't remember, but I remember some method called write a scenes, write file scenes. So yeah, write file scenes. So you need two arguments. The first argument will be the file that you want to write to. The second argument will be the data that you want to write, right? It's different from read file scene. Read file scene, you only need to know which file you want to read. But for writing a file, you need the data as well. What you want to write, what you want to overwrite, right? So we need at least two arguments here, the file and the data. So we can do something like this, fs dot write file scenes. So the file will be the same file, right? And the data, where do we get the data from? Problems. Where do we get the data from? So so just call it data here, right? So usually you will get the data whenever you call a function and you pass the data argument, the parameter to that function. So like this. But if you look at the documentation, that data, it could be a string, it could be a buffer, it cannot be a JavaScript object, right? It can be a string, it can be a buffer, it can be data field, I don't know what it is, a type array. So it cannot be a JavaScript object. So we need to either turn it into strings or make it into a buffer. So I think making it a string is easier because this file is JSON. JSON here is just a string. So question, let's see. I like this kind of wrap up question here. We target the JSON file, yes. Then we get the value of the data by getting from the argument when we call the function, yes. And there's one, pass it. Okay, so here data here, I expect this data here to be a string. It has to be a string, right? A string or buffer to data.json, right? So the data here is not a string yet. It's a JavaScript object or JavaScript array. So to make it into a string, we do JSON.stringify data. Okay. So how do we know read documentation? Always read the documentation. Don't assume anything, right? Don't assume anything. Please read the documentation. And if you have used it a bunch of times, you should remember what it's expected to have, right? For example, string, buffer, type array, data view. There's nowhere say object. Okay, right. So we convert into a string, we save it back to the data. Okay. Parse is like we convert from string to JavaScript object. Stringify, we convert from JavaScript object to string. Right? They work opposite way. Okay. Get. Okay, so let's test this function. I'm gonna copy this and put it here. So I'm gonna call the function save data, and I'm gonna pass in one argument testing. Let's see what happened here. I'm gonna save. I'm gonna run the app again. Okay, so now I expect to see this array in my data.json. Yes, it works, right? So that's how we read data from a file, or how we write data to a file. So what's left is to manipulate the data, right? Okay, so let's get back to this one. Okay. Okay, what's left is like, how do we change the data here? So let's go back to this code. So I'm gonna do const to-dos equal. So can you guess what I'm gonna type next? So I'm gonna ask Tuấn. No data, correct. Okay. And then we do to-do.push, the new to-do. And what happened afterward? What do I have to do here? Lastly, we have to save it to our database, right? So I'm gonna do save data to-dos. That's pretty much it. Okay, so now I'm gonna do not app.js, and I want to add go have lunch. Hit enter. Okay, I don't see any error, so I expect to see another to-do here. Go have lunch. Cool. And let's wrap it up before we actually go have lunch. Right. If I'm too fast, you need to stop me right away. don't wait until too late. All right. So this part of code is like we read the argument from the command line. Okay. Let me explain this first, and I will explain the load data again. Oh, I'll explain. There's a couple of restrictions with that. Okay. So this if else block here is that we want to read the arguments from the command lines, right? We look at the third command or the third argument, which is the add here. So if the text is add, we check the next argument. If it exists, I'm going to use argument to add it to the list. So where do we get the list from? We define a function just to read the data from data.json file here. And the whole function here is going to return the job object, which is an array. Right. to be a JavaScript array. Okay. Array is an object. Okay, so we have an array using this syntax, load data. We use the fs module from Node.js. We run read file since. Which issue, Mark? This method, we need there's only one required argument, which is the path to the file we want to read, right? Okay, something wrong in your JSON file. Go into your data.json, delete everything, or make it an empty array. Okay. In here, we have the path to the file that we want to read, and the results. This method will return a buffer. We did change that buffer to a string using a toString method. So this is going to be a string, just a string, nothing else. And then we convert a string into JavaScript object. Okay, it could be an array, it could be a number, it could be anything, as long as it's a JavaScript object. And then we return that. Right. The purpose of doing this is that we can use a couple of JavaScript methods to manipulate the object. For example, here we're gonna push new item into that list, to that array. Okay. And finally, we want to save the data back, right? Make no sense if we read the data, we do something with the data, and then we not saving it back. Where is here? Okay. Before I get pushed, yeah, just right before it get pushed. Okay, we need one function to. You don't actually need this function, but you should make this a function so that people understand what you're going to do here, right? So this function just to save the data to that file. And this file has to be a string or a buffer. Okay, to make it into a string easier, much easier, as well because JSON is a string. The whole JSON here is just a string. So we stringify it. We stringify the JavaScript object into string, and then we save it to data.json. That's basically it. Okay, so we have two utilities function that we can use again and again and again. And in the middle, between these two functions, we need to manipulate the data. For example, we want to remove one item from there. We want to add more item to that. You don't need to use in argument. Which one? Yeah, it only works for one word. If you want to have multiple words, you need that. Okay. Good. At least you try something and you figure out what went wrong. That's good. So that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions? But for now, this only allow a laying of 2 arrays in DB. Yeah, Jishon, I'm gonna upload right as soon as I close this one. For now, this only allow a length of 2 array in DB. That's right over position 1 every time. What does it mean, Mark? All right, so right now I have 3 elements, right? What if I have one more?
Then there must be something wrong with mine because every time I add another one, it just keeps overwriting position 1, index 1.
Okay. Make sure you push and you save the to-dos. Why? What? Okay. Can you paste the code on Discord so I and Samti I can help you with that?
You can have a look at it after that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna leave this one here. It's right here. What? Oh, guys, you have to close this file. Make sure you close this file. Don't leave it open. Because sometimes VS Code will understand that you're not changing the data on the file. Okay. All right, is it done? Still, I have no idea, man. Okay, one way you can use try and catch. So there's one way to improve it. You can use try and catch here. Catch. So if something's wrong with the when we read the data, we can always return an empty array, right? Yeah. Don't worry. Okay. Okay. Right. So it's really late. So Jishan asked me to upload the video right away, like as soon as possible. So guys, I'm gonna close this video and upload the video. So the code is here. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna paste it on this code if you want. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, there we go. Okay, see you guys after lunch. Bye-bye.